Hey everybody, welcome to the 296th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is coming out to you on Thanksgiving Day if you are in the US. So I'm going to say a big thank you to my co-host,
Kevin Toffel,
who was mildly surprised that I'm calling out a thank you to him.
I was.
He's like, do I say my name now? We are here with an amazing show for you. Our guest is going to be Nick Holzer, who is head of Whisk at Samsung Next. And he's going to be talking about the future of the smart kitchen. We're going to be talking about IoT and how we might get flavor profiles sent to us, the challenges of making a kitchen truly smart. It's a really fun and food-oriented episode just for y'all. And in the news section, we're going to be talking about a few selections from our gift guide, which will be out tomorrow in the newsletter. So you can sign up for the newsletter at stacyoniot.com. Or you can see it on the website at stacyoniot.com. We'll then switch to talking about Wemo because I've had a really bad experience with them and I'm a little sad. Kevin is embarking on a probably year-long journey to make his life a little bit more private. And so he's going to be talking about some of the things he's doing. He's done a lot on the mobile side and the website, but what can he do on the smart home side? Amazon Sidewalk News, we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to talk about updates to Google Assistant on Fitbit and scheduling. I tried it. I'll tell you my experience. And I found this really fun, exciting Kickstarter that I'm just going to tell you about, even though it won't be delivered till September 2021, which is a really long time away. But I love the idea. And I've got a review of the Chef IQ Smart Cooker that it's too late to buy it for Thanksgiving, but maybe it'll be a good Christmas present. And we're also going to hear from our sponsor, Calyx, before we hear from Nick at Whisk. And now, let's hear from another one of our sponsors, TerraCode. Get your IoT project off the ground and take it to the next level with TerraCode. TerraCode has helped a major medical device manufacturer connect devices and figure out when they needed servicing a week ahead of time with close to 100% accuracy. It also helped an energy company connect its fleet of equipment to predict service calls. Learn more and get a free IoT audit at terracode.com. That's TERA code.com. Okay. We're not going to give you everything on the gift guide, but we wanted, for those of you who don't get the newsletter, who are just like desperate, you're like, I can't wait a day. What are you thinking about for this year, for holidays? And we're basically thinking about plants.
Well, the gift guide is more than just the plant stuff, but we're going to highlight the plant stuff because we found so many cool things.
Yeah, this is the year because I moved and got a real house that I'm going to live in for a while. I invested in plants because I like being surrounded by them. Plus, in quarantine, there's not a lot else you can do, right? I can obsess over plants. So I suggest a really good stocking stuffer is a $30 sensor I found on Amazon. It's called the Olivan Plant Monitor. And it has an accompanying app called Flower Care. I just want to let everybody know, though, that this is a sensor that you can buy for $99 if you buy it as the US version, which is called Kale. Don't do that. It's the same app. It's the same hardware. Spend $30 buying the Olivan Plant Monitor instead, and you're going to feel much better about it. And this is just a Bluetooth-based sensor you shove in your plant, your house plant, and it will measure light, soil, fertility, room temperature, and moisture. And you use the app, and it asks, what kind of plant is this stuck in? And then it uses the plant's health needs to tell you if there's, too much water or not enough or whatever. And it's working really well, and it's not expensive. So I suggest that as a lovely stocking stuffer. And speaking of watering, Kevin.
Yes. So I am going to recommend the $59 Arduino-based automatic smart plant watering kit, which is sold by Elecro. It is an Arduino Leonardo board along with an OLED display, which shows the soil moisture levels of up to 4 plants. And obviously it has soil moisture sensors, 4 of them included in the kit, as well as a pump, a 4-valve system, and lots of tubing so that basically when your plant soil moisture level drops below 20%, you can have this thing just fire up water. You just need to have a reservoir of water for this thing. It's not pretty to look at because it's a lot of wires. All these sensors are wired, not wireless, and there's tubes everywhere, but it still does the trick. It's like easy to put together, even though it is an Arduino kit. It took me all of 20 minutes to put together. It's very simple. Came preloaded with the software as well. So I really like it. Again, not crazy about the looks, but you could probably jigger something behind your plants to, kind of hide it. So,
or you could 3D print some casing.
Yeah.
To be clear, this one isn't connected, correct?
That is correct. It is not connected. So you're not going to get remote access to the moisture levels and such. But the whole point of it is you don't need that. It just takes care of it for you.
It's smart. It doesn't need to be connected if it's smart. Okay. And in a similar vein, this is not really connected, although I have made it connected and kind of forced it into this category. The Soul Aspect light. I love this thing, man. I have had grow lights, like full spectrum LED lights because I live in Seattle and it's cloudy and I like growing herbs inside, not herb. And these are not, they are those grow lights, but that's not what I'm doing here. I'm growing a lemon tree and a weeping fig and a Boston fern and a bunch of cacti and some basil.
Sure you are.
I know. So all of that is under these lights, and these lights come in two sizes depending on how much light your plants are going to need. I have the large ones. The small is $149.99 and the large is $199.99. And that is expensive for a full spectrum LED. But what's great about it is it's pretty. So no one knows that it's a grow light. It just looks like a light in my house. It also doubles as a sad lamp. If you want to shove the plants aside and sit under it, you're like, oh, sun. So I think this is a great idea for somebody who's really into plants and also wants their plant section to look Instagram ready. These are very pretty. They're not crazy expensive if you look at it like as a wall sconce, which is what I look at it as. Oh, and I made them smart by plugging them into Wemo outlets, but I'm swapping them out for TP-Link HASA outlets. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's the other thing. They come with these analog timers. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Because you're going to want to schedule it. But
Stacy showed me the analog timers with the little pins that you set for every 15 minutes of the hour. And I'm like, yep.
Every 30 minutes. And, if it goes wrong and you unplug it, then the time gets off. It's just,
I grew up with those in our house to make it look like we were home when we were not. This is like the 70s and the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
Yeah. Just invest in a smart plug. Okay. Yes. Final thing
to wrap up the plant and water theme here. I'm recommending the $60 Beehive Smart Hose watering timer. It works over Bluetooth, but it also includes a very small outlet-based Bluetooth/Wi-Fi bridge that gives you remote access, so that way you can get alerts if you want to say, hey, the watering was done today and so on. But basically, you can program this thing with your own programs to say, water my lawn from this time to this time on this day or this day and that day. But also, because it has a Wi-Fi bridge and has access to the internet, it's smart enough to turn the water off early if rain is expected, because it has weather data. Or if it's going to be a very hot, dry day, it can extend the watering time beyond your program. So it's got lots of flexibility. It only works for one faucet hose, but Beehive makes a whole system. You can add on to these things if you'd like. They have multi-faucet options and so on. So this is a great starter, I think, for $60.
Sure. And a lot of people, I don't know, you might have a garden that's not part of your irrigation system, or you may be like me in an ancient house that doesn't need an irrigation system, but you do actually want to water plants occasionally. So this is a really good option for people, and it's crazy good pricing. I am actually going to snap one of these up. Okay. So let's get back to Wemo, because I want to know what happened to it. Back in 2012, in 2011, when the smart home was just a twinkle in everyone's eye, Wemos came out, and I purchased a Wemo smart plug and fell in love. People were like, why are you spending $50 on an outlet that connects to your phone? That is the dumbest thing I heard. Dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Who's laughing now?
Yeah, probably still them, because I do still spend a lot of time. But I used it to connect my Christmas lights, and it was amazeballs, and I loved it. I was like, this is so great. I no longer have to run behind the Christmas tree and finagle. And then after the holidays were over, I plugged it in. I can't remember. I've plugged it into so many things. Mm-hmm. I started playing with IFT back then. I plugged it into a fan, and I was like, if the temperature outside is above 90, turn on my fan. It was great, and it worked. But I purchased 2 Wemos out. I had one last year that I plugged my $40 LED grow light that was old school industrial looking clamped light. I plugged that into a Wemo Insight, and that was a little not awesome, but it worked. So I just, by habit, purchased 2 Wemo plugs to plug the new plant lights I got in, and it's been terrible. Getting them online was fine. I did a firmware update, and then I set a schedule on my Android device, and it didn't work. Like, for some reason, they didn't turn on, and it was like, okay. So then they worked, and then at some point, I manually turned them off, and then they never came back on. So I was like, why are you so glitchy? And then I tied them to Google, because Google has actually, this is something we'll mention again later, but Google Assistant lets you set a timer now. Amazon has had this for a while, but you can set a schedule for a device. So I set a schedule for the lights to turn on at 8 a.m. and turn off at 8 p.m. using Wemo. So I undid the Wemo schedule in the Wemo app because that was glitchy. I was like, let's see if Google's better at this. And then set up the Google thing. And what happened is when Google tried to control them, it usually would turn one of them off at the right time. It turns both of them on pretty consistently. But when it comes time to turn them off, it usually only turns one off. And it's like, by the way, I had a problem. And then it just tells me Wemo was unresponsive. So I don't know if this is Google. I'm very frustrated with Wemo, so I'm not going to be recommending any more Wemo stuff. You don't have to set it on fire or anything like that, but I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah, I mean, over time, since you first started using Wemos, which was close to the time I did as well, it seems like Wemo went from kind of leading the charge to becoming I'd say the least stable and responsive out of all the brands in terms of products. And I don't know why. The Google thing might be with the whole changeover with works with Nest and works with Google, but that doesn't explain why Wemo itself isn't working when you use it natively.
Yeah, and Wemo used to be part of Belkin. Well, Wemo is part of Belkin, but Foxconn in 2018 acquired Belkin. And I don't know if things changed then, but the bottom line is, y'all, if you're thinking about outlets, my friend Dave Zatz, when I was tweeting out that I had purchased these, he was like, ew, Wemo's terrible. He was right. I'm just going to tell you. He was right. Don't do Wemo.
I'm liking the Wise.
Do they have outlets?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just going to go with the TP links because I have had those in the past and they've worked just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yes. Okay. Moving right along. While I am connecting everything, I'm finally getting back into connecting everything. Kevin is thinking about taking everything offline. Yes.
Yes. I'm at an undisclosed location right now over a Tor browser, and Stacey has no idea where I am. That's not how far I'm going to take this, but I've been thinking a lot about data privacy, and part of it is some of the documentaries that I've watched recently, such as The Social Dilemma and the Citizen4 documentary on Edward Snowden. And while I have nothing to hide, it's just like a moral issue with me about how much companies and governments can actually learn about us from our data. So I won't get into details because this is not a mobile show, but from a mobile perspective, I am in the middle of an experiment right now where I have tested out 3 different Android custom ROMs. Basically, I have put on Graphene OS, Lineage OS, and Calyx OS. And they all have their pros and cons, but basically they are Android open source based and Google-less, essentially. And nothing against Google. I didn't choose this to rail on Google by any means. It's just you can't really easily do this with an Apple phone, and there really aren't any other choices other than iOS and Android. So regardless of all that, I've been thinking more and more about not using an off-the-shelf hub as the brain of my smart home for data privacy reasons. And I certainly have not made a decision on that yet, but I am considering it. And we've talked in the past because I've reviewed Home Assistant. Homebridge I have not used. And then, Stacey, you mentioned something that I did not know about that I bet some of our listeners do know about and probably have used, something called Hoobs. Hoobs. Hoobs, which is
Homebridge out of the box.
It is. It's Homebridge out of the box, which you can either download, you can get an SD card, or you can actually buy a piece of hardware that has everything. It's basically a Pi in a Hoobs container with pre-installed software. So I'm going to look into that. So this is really just a heads up because I know people that listen to the show are rightfully concerned about how much of their smart home data goes to the big tech companies. And once you give that data up, maybe it goes to third parties. You have no idea. You've lost control. So I will be researching, tinkering, and reporting back in the coming weeks and months. I have a feeling on this.
Yeah, and I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to supply you with hoobs and hear more about if it's even possible and what you give up by doing this.
That's a great question. Yep.
But I think it's an important thing to figure out. Like, can we do this? Okay. So that's Kevin's big project for the new year. Speaking of, Amazon sent out emails or has started enabling Amazon Sidewalk on Sidewalk-capable devices such as the Echo 4 or the fourth generation Echo. And Sidewalk is Amazon's low-power wide area network. The idea behind this is it will take only up to 500 megabytes per month of your data. That's half a gig. And it will use that to create a connectivity layer for your devices that are around your home and neighboring devices or devices that walk into your network's range. And just like LoRa or any other low-power wide area network, the goal here is to expand connectivity for connected devices. I think, and Amazon has built its own Sidewalk protocol as opposed to using something established like LoRa because it's focused on security. It's focused on ensuring that the data that travels back and forth is not visible. It's not visible on the device. It's not visible to Amazon even. They were very clear about this in an interview I did a couple weeks ago, actually, with the head of Amazon's Sidewalk efforts. And they do have a white paper that, yes, is written by Amazon, but people have read it. And I've talked to some security people about it. And they're like, this actually looks good. But people are mad. People are saying, don't opt into this. And Amazon is turning it on by default, which I'm like, come on, Amazon, don't do that to people. But I get why they're doing it, because if they ask, people are going to say no, probably.
Right. And they are trying to build a large scale network layer for devices. And I can appreciate that. But yeah, my issue is that it's basically enabled by default. They do tell you that, and they provide instructions on how to disable the feature so that your bandwidth is not used for any Sidewalk devices that other people may have near you and so on and so forth. But I just think that's the totally wrong approach from a consumer trust standpoint. Like,
now your cable companies, so Comcast, for example, they actually provide their Wi-Fi network is based on shared Wi-Fi access with people's homes, right? They actually allocate some of your home broadband, and your Wi-Fi hotspot goes to power their citywide Wi-Fi. This to me is very similar.
Yes, but I think this is one of the reasons people are not big fans of that ISP. And there's other reasons as well, but that I would not be cool with that.
So your issue is that you don't like that it's automatically opting people in and making them opt out.
Correct.
Are you also, because some of the other issues that people are having is the surveillance aspect. It feels like there's two issues being conflated here. One is that Amazon can see everything, but two is that Amazon through Ring, which will be one of the participants in the Sidewalk network, makes data available to police officers.
Right.
That isn't happening with Sidewalk. That latter bit can't happen because Amazon can't see the devices on the network.
And that's good. It is. I think my issue is that Amazon has handled that Ring neighborhood's data sharing with police in a very non-transparent way. And that has turned a lot of people off. To make this opt out while they're being relatively transparent about it, I just think that's going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths who already have a bad taste from the last thing.
To me, from a technical perspective, I think Sidewalk is valuable because of the capabilities it offers, because Amazon has the scale and reach to actually create a viable low-power wide area network. I'm excited about that because I think that's beneficial for the IoT. The way they've set it up, I think, is good for everyone because I feel like they've learned from Ring. But I do think that their history here is really going to cause a lot of problems for pushing innovation forward.
Yep.
In terms of people thinking it's bad and evil and stupid, or evil, probably. So what's frustrating to me is I've said for years that trust is the most important thing when you're building the Internet of Things because you're able to see so much about everything. And only now are companies waking up to this fact. So I don't know what to say. I'm like, Do we give them the chance? I kind of say yes, just because I feel like they have learned. Because I've looked at the protocol and what they've written about the protocol, and it looks good.
No, and I don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, I have nothing against Sidewalk Labs. I think it's an interesting innovation. It will bring a lot of value. My take is that just like my smart home, my home internet provider and bandwidth, it's up to me to allow access to that or not, as much as possible anyway.
All right. Ask Amazon. We might say yes. Okay. Let's move on because we are just, that was a conversation. You can now link your Fitbit data with your Google Assistant and ask it about last night's sleep. To which I'm like, yay. Sure. I mean, I'm a person who would use this, except I haven't set it up because I don't think it's that valuable. I used to really want, and I had something set up through IFT. I don't know if I can do it now this way, though, where I was like, I wanted to be able to say, hey, G, add, a glass of water, 8 ounces of water to my Fitbit.
Right.
That was more useful to me than asking, but I couldn't tell it to do things to Fitbit. It only worked from asking about what's happening with my Fitbit. And I have an app and a thing on my wrist that tells me that. So I didn't need that.
You're going to see more integrations. Maybe what you're looking for will be possible in the future, especially if Google's acquisition of Fitbit does go through regulation.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'm on the Fitbit train for much longer. But Google also has added the ability to schedule smart home actions. And Kevin, you've tried it?
I did. And this is nice because you don't have to go into an app or anything else. It's just an action. So you can say, hey, G, turn on the lights in 5 minutes, or turn them off in 10 minutes, or turn on a coffee maker at 8 a.m. tomorrow. It's not like a persistent kind of scheduling for recurrence. However, it's handy if you don't want something to happen right now, but you remember you want it to happen in the future within the next 7 days. So this is, developers, I don't believe, have to do anything. This has been added. It's called scheduled actions. And it's all voice commands. And I tested it before the show. And I asked it to turn my office lights on in 5 minutes. And it said, sure. And then 5 minutes later, quietly, the lights just went on. It wasn't even an audio prompt or anything.
Oh, that's nice, because Google is super chatty. Okay. And next up is a cool product I found on Kickstarter because
that's what we do.
That's what we do. This is from the UK, and I love it. It's called Bird Buddy, and it is a smart bird house? Bird feeder. Bird feeder, that's what they're called. And it has a camera that connects an app, and it identifies, it does a couple things. One, when a bird lands at your feeder, it's like, hey, you got a bird. It snaps a picture or a video, and then it identifies it. And they know a lot of birds. I think there were 1,000 birds that it's got in its database. And I love it. And you get it's like a bird photo booth, right? And the app does some like silly gamification, like, ooh, collect all the European starling species and, you win. But I do love the idea of applying this kind of smarts because I walk around with an app on my phone called PlantNet and I take pictures of all the plants just to identify them. So having a bird feeder that does this is great.
There's also a little social aspect, in my opinion, especially which is important right now because we're all kind of locked up in our homes. Sure, you can look out the window at the birds if you have a bird feeder or something, but maybe it's too far away to really see them. And it's like, hey, look, Joe's here and he's eating. Yay. I name all of the animals. I have George the squirrel who comes and eats nuts. Of course, every squirrel that eats the nuts off the deck is George. But I tell the family that, nope, that's George. That's the only George.
I'm like waiting for the social aspect where you're sharing with your friends and you're like, no, you can see the birds even when they're far away and they'll talk to you. But this is something that will ship in September 2021. And it ranges from, let's see, your early bird special that's still available is 149 euros. And the typical price is going to be 179 euros. And I should have translated that to US dollars, but let's do that really fast. It translates to about 213 US dollars. So it's a pricey birdhouse. Mm-hmm. And if you have raccoons or squirrels, I imagine you're going to get a lot of those guys. But this is adorable and fun. So maybe next year we'll have a review unit and check it out for our gift guide. Speaking of things on the gift guide, man, we're just telling you everything on the gift guide, but there's a couple more items. I have a review for you. This is a device called the Chef IQ Smart Cooker. This is a product that goes for $200, but between November 26th through December 5th, it's going to be $139.99 on Amazon, Target, and the Chef IQ website. This is, to me, what I hoped the Instapot would be, but it was not. It is a pressure cooker. It is a slow cooker. It's a steamer. It's just a bunch of stuff. The all-in-one cooking appliances are just over the top right now. This one connects via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So it connects to your phone, and you have a selection of 200, and I think it's 204 now. They add 5 new recipes a week. So you pick one of these recipes, and it will guide you throughout the entire step in the cooker. So, for example, I made beef stew, and I was like, I want to make beef stew. And it's like, okay. And you start the recipe, it sends the recipe to the cooker, and then it's like, it gives you the list of ingredients, and you should prep all the ingredients ahead of time. This is not the sort of device you want to be stopping and chopping. You want to have everything ready. So it's like, dump your onions in and saute them for 3 minutes. And then, you do it. You follow along. There's videos. There's little, if you don't know how to cut up an onion, it will show you a video about it. Very easy if you're not familiar with the kitchen. It's kind of idiot proof that way. And I did that. And then it pressure cooks. Pressure cooking is what this thing is all about. It even pressure cooks pasta, and the pasta actually turned out okay. So I was a little skeptical at first. So it does a couple things. One, it makes cooking, if you're not really familiar with cooking, very easy because you can just follow along and it tells you what to do, and it tells you time frames, and it shows you pictures. Very nice. And 2, it makes pressure cooking less fraught. I know that a lot of people, including myself, I did not grow up with a pressure cooker. So I'm kind of terrified about blowing up my kitchen. I'll be honest. I'm like, it's pressure. When that steam vents, it's a lot. You could burn your face. Mm-hmm. So this does all that. It does all the math. So you're not like putting too much liquid or not enough liquid in. It just tells you everything. There's a scale integrated in it. If you just want to make like a pot of beans and you just want to pressure cook beans, for example, there are settings for that too. And you don't even have to go to the app. You can do that on the cooker itself. You could just be like, I want to cook some black beans, or I want to cook beans. And it's like, what kind? And you're like, black beans. They're like, okay. And add 48 ounces of water. Add 2 cups of beans. Go. Actually, you can actually tell it, I only want to cook a cup of beans, and it'll adapt accordingly from there. And I will say, when I did the beans setting, it didn't cook it enough. My beans were a little too hard. And these were Rancho Gordo fancy beans. Fancy beans, y'all. So I ended up slow cooking it for another hour, which I had time to do. So it wasn't a big deal because I was just playing around with it. But that is something I was like, I think that recipe might be a little bit off. But when I pressure cooked beef, it was fine. When I made any of the pre-tested recipes, it was wonderful. And if you don't like the recipes they have, and if you're comfortable pressure cooking and you have a set recipe, you can totally do that with this too. So I think, especially at the like $140 price, this is a really compelling device for people who maybe bought an Instapot, got excited about it, and now never use it because it's too complicated, or who might be interested in a pressure cooker, but are kind of also a little leery of it. And it also can replace your slow cooker. So for me, I think I might buy this. If I buy this, I would then get rid of my slow cooker, and I would be able to get rid of my Instapot, which I literally never use. So
that's a good trade. I think you mentioned to me that you can put in what ingredients you have available in your house.
Yes, they just updated this, and I haven't tested this because they literally just updated this yesterday. But you can say, I have the following ingredients, and it will tell you how long to cook those ingredients for. And I'm not saying it's going to be a great recipe, but they will tell you. So I thought this was good. And we're going to actually talk more about this and this trend of all-in-one devices and smart cooking with our guest, Nick, coming up soon. So Chef IQ, I'll have a full review out for you. You can look at that. But I think for a lot of people, this is a really good device. It's not a necessary device, but I think it's a really good device. And if I had like a kid going to college, not that anyone's leaving the house right now, but this would be, I think, a really good option for someone like that.
A pressure cooker in every dorm room. That sounds great.
Oh, that probably is bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe if they're going to college and staying in their own apartment, because I don't think dorm rooms like allow hot plates or anything.
Correct.
Okay.
Barely. I don't even think they do that anymore.
Someone going off on their own for the first time. All right, let's move on to the voicemail and the Internet of Things podcast hotline, which is brought to you by Very. Very is a fully distributed IoT engineering firm helping you get your biggest projects fully operational on time and on budget. You can discover what Very's multidisciplinary teams can do at www.verypossible.com. All right, this week we are calling for y'all to give us a call on the hotline at 512-623-7424 because you will be entered to win an August Wi-Fi lock. It is the review unit I used, but I've reset everything. It's a fresh battery, so it will come to you ready to be popped onto your door. And right now, you have until November 30th, and your chances are really good. We have not had a lot of calls so far this November. So if you would like to be entered to win, 512-623-7424. And let's hear this week's question from Vipul.
So my question is about wearables. I have a couple of different manufacturers' smart watches, and I noticed that they have actually quite different readings when it comes to either steps or also on calories. So typically the ranges, or let's say the difference is 5-10%. You can imagine because different sensors and stuff like that, different algorithms. But when I compare a Google Fit app running on let's say a Fossil smartwatch versus another smart band or a smart watch, and I compare the calories, Google Fit is usually double the calories burnt than another smart band or smart watch. And while that's good, gives me the confidence of burning more calories, I'm not sure, am I really burning those calories? So what is the difference? And have you noticed this sort of discrepancy? Thanks, Dan. Bye.
Okay, I feel you on this because I have been testing 3 different wearable devices. So I usually wear a Fitbit Charge 3, and I've been a Fitbit user forever, for as long as I've been a Wemo user, actually.
That's saying something.
So, long time. I've been testing the Amazon Halo, and I tested the Whoop fitness band. And let me tell you, everybody was telling me different numbers. Well, Whoop didn't tell me the steps, but everybody's telling me different numbers of calories. Amazon and Fitbit can't agree on my steps. They're kind of far off on sleep. So my advice to you is to pick something and be consistent with wearing it. And if you want to know your exact calorie burn, you're really going to have to do something like track what you're eating and track your weight gain and loss over a period of time, or you're going to have to go in and get an expensive metabolic scan, which I don't think a lot of us are willing to do. The other option Kevin is going to tell you about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you guys because I've tested Garmin devices, Fitbits, the Apple Watch, Android Wear watches, or Wear OS now. I have personally found the Wear OS and Google Fit experience to be among the worst. I hate to say it, but Google, you got to do better. And I presume that's partly what the Fitbit deal is about. But that's not happened yet. What I do, I actually visit a website from somebody who is basically either is or was a professional athlete. It's dcrainmaker.com. And the guy who runs it, his name is Ray. And Ray has the most advanced data tracking, maps, and so on for all of these wearables because he wants to know which is the most accurate before he recommends you purchasing one or not. I would definitely go and look up your device there and or other devices you might be interested in for tracking this information to see which is the most accurate, because he actually has baseline metrics from the metabolic scales and so on and so forth. He knows what's accurate and what's not. So dcrainmaker.com, I always go there anytime a new wearable comes out because I want to see how accurate it is.
Yes. So you can start there and find the most accurate. Or if you're like, oh, I really like other features from this thing and that thing, the key is to wear something over time and figure out how you feel related to the data it's giving you. You cannot believe data alone. And I know that in the tech world, we constantly want to do that. But sometimes you got to believe how you feel in your own experience, your own lived experience. So hope that helps, Vipul. I know it's not buy this, it's the best. But that's what we can do here because everybody's working with their different algorithms. Mm-hmm. So, all right. If you would like us to answer your question at 512-623-7424, that is the number you should call, and you'll be entered to win an August Wi-Fi smart lock. So call Now, operators are standing by. No, we're not, but we do listen. So that concludes this portion of the show. Please stay tuned for a conversation about smart kitchens, food, and even flavor coming up next. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Calyx, and I have Pam Ferguson here from the company. Pam, let's just get started with you telling me a little bit about Calyx.
Absolutely, Stacy. Calyx is 100% focused on enabling service providers of all sizes to deliver amazing experiences in the home. We provide cloud software, systems, and services to communication service providers. In turn, those customers, the service providers, deliver future-proofed and autonomous fiber networks. It's so great to be chatting with you again today about the Revenue Edge. Your listeners can find out more about it at calyx.com/revenueedge.
So Calyx is helping service providers go beyond managed Wi-Fi with their Revenue Edge solution. How do apps fit in?
While many large service providers have apps focused on billing and other account information, we see that mobile app as an even more critical part of the home network experience than just account info. Consumers are inundated with a wide range of connected home devices and their corresponding apps. It causes confusion for many, and sadly, that confusion drives frustrated calls back to the service provider. When service providers weren't involved in solutions purchased by those subscribers for their connected homes in the first place, it can be super challenging for them to really help. We're working with the service providers looking to change up this unfortunate, I'll call it a cycle, delivering the in-home experience, starting with a subscriber app for seamless turn-up, and then ongoing tools like parental controls, network security, and prioritization. It all changes the focus. Service providers can then curate amazing experiences for their subscribers and actually help their subscribers if there are issues down the road. A personalized version of our app we call Command IQ puts the service provider brand into the palms of the subscriber's hands and gives them a direct communication channel to suggest new ways to enhance their home network depending on their own needs.
What does Calyx have in store for the Command IQ app that you use to enable service providers?
Command IQ is already widely adopted by many of our customers. It's seen as a best practice to interact with subscribers. Adoption rates by their subscribers are upwards of 80% right now. It's fantastic. We recently announced a new look and feel for Command IQ. It's launching in early 2020. We're pretty excited about how this clean, intuitive design will continue to evolve the relationship between the service provider and their subscriber. That's really what the Blast Ultimate Wi-Fi experience is all about from Calyx, bringing exceptional home network experiences to every corner of the subscriber's home.
Thanks, Pam. Can you remind people where to go to find out more information about Calyx?
If you're with a service provider, you can go to calyx.com/revenueedge. If you're an end consumer and want to learn more about our awesome Blast Wi-Fi 6 systems or Command IQ, you can check out blastwifi.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacy Higginbotham, and today's guest is Nick Holzer, and he is the founder of Whisk, which was purchased by Samsung Next last year. And so now he is the head of product at Whisk. Hello, Nick. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I am super excited because, as I promised our audience, we're going to be talking about the smart kitchen and food, which, honestly, my favorite topics. So let's get started by having you tell us a little bit about Whisk, because it may not be common knowledge for everyone.
So Whisk is a food app where users can create shopping lists, save recipes, we help them cook the recipe with guided cooking, and ultimately help them turn all the recipes that they find into a meal on the table.
Excellent. Yes, I am the most ambitious recipe, clipper. It's virtual clipping, but I'm like, oh, I will make this. And then I'm like, yeah. So I appreciate the app. And okay, and if you're in the US, happy Turkey Day. And we are going to be talking about food. So I have had dreams of my smart kitchen forever. And when Samsung purchased Whisk, I know the idea was to kind of pull the process of making food and make it easier with connected appliances. And I'd love to hear where y'all are at Samsung are on that journey and how far you think that journey really has to go.
Yeah, so users find a lot of recipe inspiration from lots of different sources. And the challenge that we're trying to solve is that often on these appliances, you only have a limited selection of recipes that the appliance manufacturer has integrated. So by allowing users to use recipes from anywhere, they can now take their Instagram recipes, their recipes from a certain publisher, from a video site, from even their printed cookbooks at home, and use those seamlessly with their appliance. So we have a consumer app, we have integrations with hardware, we have integrations with lots of different big publisher sites and people who are building these great apps in the ecosystem. We also integrate some of the big grocery retailers. Essentially, what we're trying to do is connect everything together and make it work seamlessly together.
So in the future, let's say 3 to 5 years from now, what would my recipe gathering, shopping list, and then final cooking experience look like in an ideal world?
In an ideal world, you would be able to go on multiple different devices. That might be your mobile phone, your tablet, your laptop, your voice assistant. And as you go through your life, add things to your recipe box, add things to your shopping list, and your appliance would know exactly what you've done, away from the appliance. When you get to your appliance, it will know what you want to cook. It'll have all those recipes there for you, and it'll help control the appliance as you go through the cooking process. The fridge will know what's inside the fridge, and it will inform the kind of display what kind of recipes from your life that it should show you based on what you are able to cook with what's in your fridge already. All the different kitchen appliances will use their sensors and controls intuitively with things that we know about you. And that includes your actions of saved recipes and shopping lists and meal plans. It also includes your preferences. What do we know about what you like? Do you have a certain avoidance, or do you have a certain preference for a certain ingredient? Do you shop at a certain retailer which has a certain promotion on? Do you live in a state where it's incredibly sunny right now and we know you love to barbecue? So ultimately, it's how can we help you take your data with you throughout your life, and how can we help you connect it seamlessly to the places where you want to be able to use it?
Got it. Okay. So that felt like super futuristic, and I feel like we're not there today. Right now, I just purchased a fridge, and it is not connected in the way that it would need to be connected for that. So I'm thinking cameras or some sort of insights. Yep. Nor is it actually made by Samsung. I should throw that out there. So I have my fridge. So I feel like I have just set back by my smart kitchen by like 10 years by purchasing a dumb appliance. So how do we get to this place?
I think it's definitely an evolutionary process. It will take some time for people to have smart devices in their kitchens. They definitely don't all have them today. It is today quite a niche market. But if you had bought a Samsung Family Hub fridge, even a few years back, it has something called View Inside, where it does have a camera. It does use AI image recognition of the inside of your fridge, and it does predict what is in your pantry based on that camera. And the Whisk APIs, right the way back to 2018, have been taking your recipes that you have sort of selected and mapping them against what's inside your fridge. So absolutely kind of the fully connected journey where every single part of your inspiration of food is able to be seamlessly put into a recipe box, and then it seamlessly maps to what's inside your fridge and seamlessly maps to your hardware. That requires more integrations to happen. It requires you to have all those different appliances that have all those different technical integrations there available to them. But if you look at some of the commitments from most of the big manufacturers out there, including Samsung, that will be what the future lineup of digital appliances is. And I think that future isn't actually as far away as we think. We're able to do most of it with apps. Yes, it might not have that seamless integration into the oven or into the fridge, But the applications are certainly there today, and there are lots of different flavors of those applications. The integrations with the appliance, for people to have those in their homes, we're still a number of years away from that being commonplace.
And you didn't really use the word integrations, which I'm like, okay, that's not fun. Yep. I would say it's a continual, like if you're going to do that, then you're investing in, constantly updating your integrations as people change their APIs and maybe what their devices can do. So I'm curious how we make this happen and maybe make the integrations less unwieldy. So it seems like a ripe area for standards. And it seems like the best place to standardize might be the recipe. And I'm curious, is there an effort there or what has happened there?
There are lots of different efforts around standardizing recipe information as well as other related information like nutritional information. So for recipes, there's standards like H-recipe, and there's a bunch of other micro formats, which essentially just you define within the pages of your content, you define what is the header, what is the ingredient, what is the instruction body, etc. And then that allows any machine to be able to read it really, really quickly. The challenge with recipe content is that writers take so much artistic license in how they phrase things. So often they'll have almost entire sort of instruction methods written into the ingredient. So you can take a lemon or a lime, but make sure it's not peeled and make sure it's the right color. There's lots of different instructions that you start to come across. People have written into instructions as you look at it.
So you can't focus on a 3/4 inch diced Yukon potato because your algorithm's like, do I focus on the Yukon potato? Do I focus on the 3/4 inch? Do I focus on the dice? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can actually do it. So we have a bunch of deep learning-based natural language processing, which is just a fancy word for a machine that understands text like a human would. And you can start to understand that. And what's interesting is it actually becomes very, very important when you try and do anything with the content. If you know that something has been chopped, you know that it's fresh, and therefore you know in the purchase experience to go and buy the ingredient at, let's say, one of the big grocery retailers, you know what kind of basil or potato or whatever it is that you want to go and give the user. You also know when you get to cook it, you need to know what is the ingredient and what cut of the meat is it, or was it fresh or was it frozen, etc. So all that data can be mined out. That isn't part of a standard today, but the recipe content has got lots and lots of standards around it, which makes the process of going deeper on the understanding much, much easier.
So let's talk about the devices in the kitchen of the future, just because it's super fun to think about this. Kitchens have been the same for a really long time. I think the last big appliance that entered in was, the microwave. And now we've got sous vide cookers and steam ovens and all of this fun stuff. So I'd love to hear how you, as a technologist thinking ahead, navigate the challenges of being in a kitchen from 1960, perhaps.
Yeah. It's fascinating when you look at actually how kitchen modeling has changed over those years. Something that kind of arrived relatively recently was kitchen islands, where you have like a countertop in the middle of a kitchen area. And actually a surprisingly large number of kitchens have these. And the reason is when you look at how kitchens are becoming a room where people have conversations and actually collaborate on the cooking process. So 3/4 or 2/3 of users collaborate on the process of deciding what to cook and cooking it, doing all the chores in between of grocery shopping, etc. And that's not what used to happen. The kitchen used to be a separated room away from the dining room, away from the main room where you're entertaining people. Food becoming now a form of entertainment. And actually, if you look at the reasons why people cook, it's one of the top 3 because they enjoy cooking, they enjoy the process. So how do devices help that? I think devices ultimately are able to do much, much more and are able to help users do more things at the same time. There are ovens where you can cook different dishes at different temperatures on different parts of the oven. That's possible in large household ovens as well as some of the more niche, new, smart ovens being released in the market. So ultimately, I think the trend towards one device being able to do a lot more, cook in a lot more different ways, and is able to help you get better outcome, I think is a big thing. The other thing that I'm fascinated by is when you go onto a site like allrecipes.com and you go to their recipes, which a lot of them are user submitted, and you just go click a few back or forward and look at what users have uploaded. Often you'll see burnt recipes or recipes that to me look disastrous and I would never upload. I would be embarrassed, but people do. This is their proud creation. And so when you look at that, I think you really start to see what goes wrong in the cooking process for a lot of people when they try something new. And that's one of the reasons why people are cooking the same stuff again and again, because they trust it, they know how to make it, there's no risk of it going wrong. So part of what we're trying to think about as well is how do we help people be more successful when they're cooking? And that means burn things less often. It means not forget the ingredients that you need. So the shopping process, you need to make sure you remember all the different items. And then obviously devices with sensors and software with control and interfaces can really, really help that process.
Okay. Yes. I think the biggest challenge I have when I make a new recipe is that, and I do it often because I think that's fun. I hate boring things, but I encounter their levels of spice are never my levels of spice. It's like,
yeah.
And it's the worst because you're like, oh, I just spent 2 hours making something and it's bland. I'm curious, like, this is not something that I feel like technology will solve, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think it is. With data on recipes, once we know what all the different ingredients are and we know the amounts that you have, all we need to do is connect it to a data source of how each ingredient tastes. And there's actually open data sets today which describe exactly how, in a chemical way, each ingredient tastes. And there are a number of different companies out there, we're not one of them, who are starting to use that kind of data and combine it with recipes to start to predict trends and predict whether someone will like something or not. The biggest space that I've seen, or the biggest kind of industry that I've seen with this at the moment, is in the flavor insights industry. Companies like Givaudan, one of the big French flavor houses, use chemical compound data to design new flavors. For example, for chips or crisps, depending which country you're in, they use it most of the big takeaway companies, the big chains, buy these flavorings en masse, and they predict what flavors will users want. And they do that with lots of different panels and stuff. But this data exists. We know what ingredients and what amounts you have. I predict in the next 5 or so years, we'll be in a position to give you your personal flavor score, and we'll know what the flavor of every recipe is, and we'll be able to predict the match. Now, you don't obviously want only recipes that match you perfectly, because you also want a bit of variety. And so you may want to travel to a different geography or place and have recipes from there. It might help you in restaurants. When you go and you don't know what to eat on the menu, it could theoretically give you a prediction score of what you should eat. And in some ways, you're actually seeing, through a different data methodology, you're seeing Google Maps do this already, where when you look at some of the restaurants in some of the locations around the world, when you're looking at Google Maps, it'll actually tell you this is a 98% match to you. And they're doing that not on the flavor of the recipes being cooked in that restaurant, obviously, at least not today. But I think that is where the space is going. As we connect all these data points, a lot of these kind of use cases that you think might not be possible actually suddenly become possible. And that's what's so wonderful about working with food data.
That's really exciting. I can't wait for my personalized food score. Although, and this gets really interesting to me because I feel like the computing industry, the data industry as a whole has focused on individuals, right? Computers are personal, one person, one device. The kitchen is really interesting. The smart home itself is interesting because you have groups of people there. And most people, not all, but most people cook for a couple people, maybe 3 or 2. And I would be curious how you're thinking about personalization when you think about it being personalized for multiple people in a household, and how that makes life easier or harder for you.
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, and one that I genuinely debate on almost a weekly basis. If you look at someone like Netflix or Spotify or various different Google services, they all have the concept of a family account where you can invite members of your household to one account and share stuff with them. Now, most of the time, what you share is actually a subscription or a billing plan. So it's not quite as exciting as food recommendations. With households, you've also got the challenge of people will come to visit. It's not just what is right for your family, but it's also, is there someone visiting, or are the kids in 3 days a week and the other days they're out at some club or something, a sports club or something. The understanding who is in the house or who's going to be involved in that specific meal and what their preferences are starts to become a really exciting but potentially complex opportunity. We could build something today that does recommendations for you based on the people in your house and actually give you some pretty good recommendations for that. The challenge is, how do you build something that's easy to use? So you don't want something where you have to go through hundreds of different menus and settings every single week to be able to set which day which person is in your household. So really about how you create something easy and how do you balance the right answer versus something that's easy to use. That's something that some of the challenges we're thinking about on a week-to-week basis. Ultimately, combining preferences of diets and liked ingredients and avoided ingredients and things like that in a group way is not technically that difficult, and will be something that you'll see in product, I think, around the world by different providers, including us, in the next year or so.
Got it. Yes, because that is one of the things I think about, like, hey, not just like, how do I de-authenticate my fridge from me when I move, right? Which if I connect it to my account, I need to, with all of that data, right? Yep. But then there's also like, oh, what if my kid goes away to college? They're not a Nest Learning thermostat. And even that takes 2 weeks, which would be terrible, like 2 weeks of terrible food recommendations, right? So
yeah, that's challenging. I mean, it's super challenging. It's the interface of how you tell the device what you want and what's changed in your life, I think is key to that. And, again, how much are you happy with your smart home detecting who's already in the home and then telling services like our service that's the case? Theoretically, you could automate it all. But do users even want that? There's lots of questions to be answered that we haven't answered yet.
Right. Although I think part of the reason people are worried about this is because of broad trust issue, one. But two, the services aren't that compelling yet to, like, if I'm going to tell you who's in my home, what they're doing, it's pretty personal information. If you give me something good in exchange for that, and I trust you, I think it will happen. Making my life easier when it comes to prepping and picking meals is probably a really good reason to share that. So we'll see. Let's go back to physical things in the kitchen just for fun. Let's end on what device you're most excited about. Just a physical what device or maybe service or intelligence you're most excited about going forward into the next year for the smart kitchen?
I am most excited about pantry management. I often have this problem where I look at my fridge and I think, what should I cook tonight based on what I have, or involving buying very little from my local store, which is like a 1 minute walk away from where I live. And I think that also solves, it involves lots of things like personalization, making sure it recommends things that I can make that I will also like. I think it'll help me in my life to waste less food. I'm quite conscious about that. I actively try to not waste food, but it sometimes results in me making things out of the leftover ingredients that I'm not proud of. Random mixes of stranger things that are going off in my fridge. I think there is a big opportunity to help users with that, and that's what I'm personally most excited about. What I'm dreading is an experience where I have to manually log everything that I have in my pantry. I just simply would never do that. I'm too lazy. So that's kind of the challenge to overcome there. But yeah, I think the opportunity is massive on that.
Sure. And Amazon actually launched a smart shelf which you mentioned being lazy. I think this is a really interesting idea is you tell it like what's on the shelf, but then you always have to put the item back on the shelf in the same place, which I could do, but my 14-year-old daughter might not. So I think pantry management is like my holy grail, but it's also like, how on earth could you ever do that?
Yeah, even in the fridge. I mean, when we're with Family Hub and Inside there trying to use image recognition, the problem is people wrap things in cellophane or in some tin foil, or they put it in a non-see-through lunchbox or all sorts of different strange things, and no visual recognition is ever going to be able to see through that stuff. So it's really interesting and to see how can you create an experience where it understands enough about you without asking you too many questions. I think that's the big challenge.
Yeah, good luck. Okay. Well, Nick, thanks so much for coming on the show this week. We really appreciate having you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.